Ready?
Cool. So, what is your experience with immigration in your life?
Do you have any?
Do you have any? Yeah, like are you not direct experience? If you have any secondhand experience, or if not, we'll just.
Pretty much just what I was telling you guys before this video started. My sister's boyfriend's dad, who came from Greece, and then my grandmother came from Portugal. But she was like a baby, so she like doesn't know anything about it really. And her mother died when she was really young.
I have no experience with it, no.
Well, going back, this is kind of like far away, but my grandpa, his parents were both from Denmark, and so they immigrated over, and then they had him in the U.S. So he was like, born here, but both his parents are Danish. So yeah,
That's cool.
That's a good point. Everybody,
Yeah.
all Americans are.
Yeah,
are
we're-
Yeah, all of us have stuff. We go far back enough, then we're all, doing. I mean, unless you're like literally like Native American
Yeah.
through, then like. So, but even then, if you go back far enough, they still came over here at one point. So, anyway, so let's just say if your family had to emigrate, what would be those reasons for why you would? Would they be positive? Would they be negative?
Can you think of both? Just like reasons, what would, based on this and the hardships and things that you've seen, some of them were hard, some of them weren't, what would be reasons, both positive and negative, that would convince you that immigration was the best like response for your family?
I feel like a lot of it seems to be safety reasons. For everyone's trying to flee to some girl's dad got assassinated. I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
you said
I was
like
like,
very like
calmly.
I was
like,
Yeah.
That's a pretty big
I was like, oh my god. But yeah, I feel like that's huge, especially like raising kids, like, because I want a family of my own one day, and if I felt like they were in like danger, like I wouldn't want that for them at all. I'd want to be somewhere a lot safer. Even in America, I feel like we can have like issues like that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was just gonna add that like other reasons that seem to be like economic, like more like job opportunities and like educational opportunities, because one of the girls was talking about how in her like original country you had to like pay for education, and so like public schools are pretty much free here. So
Yeah.
If you moved, would you be willing to live with relatives in another country?
That'd be a part of your idea of immigration when you think immigrant. Is
That's
it like
true.
you move and you are established there, like in the same position you left in, or would you be willing, even if it meant you had to live with someone?
I think it would depend on your background, really. Like a lot of them seem to come from, they lived with many generations, so I would assume they would want to try and stay that way. But I guess it would depend on your situation. Sometimes you might not have family where you're trying to immigrate.
I feel like definitely if there's like some kind of safety issue like we were talking about, I'd be willing to like live on the ground somewhere, like for the safety of myself and everybody.
yeah, and for a few of the families, it seemed like they didn't really have a choice, because like they didn't have like a lot of money coming over, so they had to have a place to stay while they were like getting a job and like getting like some money so they could like get their own apartment or something.
Yeah.
So, do you think that you would ever be willing, and obviously without the threat of like, obviously the one girl's very dramatic, her father was assassinated, but would you be willing to, if immigration was you were going to go there legally, it was not because you were like prisoners of some sort of political regime, would you ever be willing to separate your family the way that they did? The Colombian boy, I believe at the end, his family was separated, they didn't get to stay together, so he had parents in both places and other relatives. Would you be willing to do something like that if it was not like political asylum or something that you were seeking? Does that seem like a viable option, or would that be something you would avoid at all costs?
I feel like that's kind of hard to answer just because I've never been put in that kind of situation.
Use your
before.
imagination.
Well, I mean, no one really wants to be separated from their parents like that. I feel like as we get older, we're kind of like, yeah, I never want to like live with my parents again. That's not something I want, but
Yeah. It would definitely be hard. Like I'm from Massachusetts, and already it's like I remember my first year I was just like, I want to hug my dad. And like I want to live somewhere warm, but like I want to bring them with me, and like never mind moving to another country, especially if you knew you were gonna move there and you weren't gonna have the means to fly and see them, like that would be like a big factor in whether I was going to leave, and depend how serious the reasons are, like whether I should or not. Because like exactly what that one guy was saying about like his aunt has cancer, and then like his like grandfather got taken, and like then he was sick or something, and like that's horrible to not like have the closest people with you there in those like really hard times.
Do you think that the process of immigration for a family that didn't have to split, like your spouse didn't stay and you went, but a family that went together, do you think that in general that would be a factor that would knit your family together, or a factor that would make it harder for you to stay together? Like, do you think there would be resentment from your family members, or do you think that it would be something that would ultimately make your family stronger? Granted, this would be a case by case, but what do you think? What would be your general like impression of that be?
I think if the family comes together, it would probably bring them closer.
Yeah, especially if they don't like speak the language of the place that they're immigrating, like at first, because it would be hard to talk to anybody except your family, because you have to speak the same language, and if you're plunged into like a completely different culture, it's going to be really like isolating for other people. So you kind of have to like stick together a little bit.
Forced family bonding.
And I feel like even if you're like learning a language, it gets like tiring. Cause like I studied abroad in Spain, and like it's fun meeting new people, but then I was like in my group, I was like, all right, now let's use some words that I actually know.
Yeah. It wears you out a lot to try and
exactly. And you're constantly listening to everything, like, wait, what is that? Okay, I can maybe put that together.
Okay, so do you think that we're gonna move to like the topic of immigration in America? That was kind of like the family-based one, so this is immigration in general. Do you think, because the video did have one girl who is openly undocumented and it's very apparent about her whole family, have your thoughts, one, do you have feelings on immigration in the US as it stands right now? And if so, did that video with the personalized account of someone who is undocumented affect that in any way? No is an acceptable answer.
I feel like I've heard a lot of like the immigration stories and stuff, and they're like so sad. I'm just like, why can't everyone just come here if they want to come here? But I understand that I don't understand politics. And I understand that maybe there needs to be rules and stuff, and I get that, but like I just feel like it's so horrible that people want to come here and work their butts off to have a good life, and that it's so difficult for them to do that, and that if you're willing to like almost die trying to cross a border, like I feel like you should be able to be welcomed, especially like being in the country we live in, where we have all come from somewhere else, you know.
I mean, I like get both sides of it. Like I completely agree with you, but at the same time, we have to think about what about our resources. Like we have to deal with the population we currently have, and if we keep getting people in, it's like we can't control our own resources. We don't want to run out of things like that. Like, so I can understand the reasoning for that.
If you were coming from the background that some of these people are coming from, like the abject poverty and things of that nature, do you think that, now granted you can be driven to anything if you have children and a family, but do you think that moving somewhere illegally would even be something that would cross your mind for something you have no guarantee of, a future you have no guarantee of, you just hope for? Would that be something you would consider to be a viable option to put your whole family in that sort of situation?
If you're desperate,
If
you're desperate, definitely. But they said that like that one girl who's openly undocumented, they lived in constant fear.
Right.
Like, what's the difference between being in constant fear here and constant fear there? Like, I don't see it.
I think the main difference would be for like their daughter. Like if they get, now I might not be right, but like the parents could be deported, but like the girl would stay, because like she's an American citizen. So I feel like the rationale was that like yes, like we could be sent back, but at least like our daughter will be okay, and like she's in college now, so like that's like she's getting an education, she's like being set up for a career, and so I feel like that's what they were, like that was their goal. They weren't really thinking of like their own well-being.
So kind of like a selfless thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like then too, like I don't know, it's definitely hard to say what I would do in that situation. But I feel like too, you have to think about like, all right, this is what we want for our daughter, but like, what does our daughter want? Like, would she rather be here with us? Like, if something happens to us, like, what's gonna happen to her if we leave? Like, cause she did go to college, but like, imagine if she was just like a baby when that happened. Like, it's a lot to consider. I feel like it would probably help, like, if you knew people who went to America and kind of how it went.
Yeah.
If it went bad, maybe don't go. If it went good, maybe.
So there are a lot of factors to consider outside of just it's not legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you compare the story of the girl from Colombia who was studying nursing, who's like fair skinned, all that sort of stuff, with the girl who is undocumented and from Mexico, they both had really severe circumstances. Her father was assassinated, her parents were very poor, but the Colombian girl is obviously able to show her face on camera and the Mexican girl is not. So based on this and any experience you might have or personal thoughts, do you think that there is any sort of racial bias for people that the U.S. encourages to immigrate or not?
Definitely.
Really?
Oh,
Based
yeah.
on what sort of factors?
Well, I feel like I've even just like seen videos of like when people are speaking Spanish and like people yell at them, and like police officers or people too, like they have racism and stuff. Like I feel like that definitely happens if someone fits in. It's almost like if you're going to like a business meeting and you're wearing business clothes, like no one's gonna think you're not supposed to be there. But if you look different than like what you would expect an American citizen to look like people are just gonna look into that more, even if it might not be driven by racism. It might just be like, oh, like this person might not be from this country, so like let's look into that.
I'm confused. Was the Colombian girl, were her parents undocumented? Or like, what did she
I believe the only one undocumented is the one, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, was the only one was the girl who didn't show her face.
Yeah, I think
Because we
so.
had another video too, and her face was covered also. So if
Yeah.
their faces are shown, I do believe they are undocumented.
I think a lot of it also has to do with what the government thinks they can contribute to the society as
The acceptance of immigrants?
Yeah, for acceptance of immigrants, because I don't know the immigration process.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a part of it, of like what you think you can contribute to the American society.
So some of it could be your economic like
I don't know.
resources and what you bring to the
I
the
think
country in
it's
addition
more
to
like what you know, like what you can
Okay.
do, like, or at least that's what I feel like. Because if it's economic reasons, a lot of these people wouldn't be.
right. So like skills related. Are
Yeah.
you a valuable member just in and of
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah.
Interesting thought.
Mm.
Okay, so moving on to the educational, like cultural sort of stuff, like Leah was saying you want to have a family. So do you think that schools, because one of the Colombian girl again was saying that like, and one of the other ones too was saying how her teacher, they sent her home and they told their parents that she's not learning English. She's not capable of learning English. They have all these problems. So do you think that schools in America, because we do have our bilingualism is growing because we have so many immigrants, and especially here in Florida, because we are so close to the Spanish-speaking community, do you think that schools should place higher priority on bilingual education, or at least on programs that offer some sort of language support for students that come into our country and have these sorts of problems?
Definitely. I feel like we're being very biased if we don't have that, like, we ourselves we're like melting pot, like we have mixes of everything. I feel like it's weird that we don't have anything that like helps them come into our community, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. Not to mention, I feel like you should try and help them learn the language as soon as possible. Like a couple people mentioned like not being able to make friends, and like I can't imagine trying to learn like the stuff I'm learning now in another language. Like that'd be so difficult, and then like your whole family has just been uprooted. Like I feel like just the compassion side of things, like the education system, I feel like is a lot about like having kids like be safe and be heard and whatever, and I feel like that should be for whatever language you speak. Like there should be programs that can help you be part of the school.
Also, when you're younger, it's easier to learn
Sure.
another language. So when they're at the age that they're talking about coming in, they can learn English pretty fast, especially if they're going to an English-speaking school. Like,
So we can make that whole process easier for them if we facilitated that better, you think? Cool. So what would you do, once again hypothetically, if your child or say your younger sibling had this sort of experience where you chose to immigrate and you had your teacher say your kid's not learning, your kid is not capable of doing this for whatever the reason? How would you feel? How would you try to help? Because remember, you would have just immigrated yourself. You probably don't speak the language they're studying with, so it's not like you just need an extra 15 minutes to help them with their homework. What do you think would be your response as an older sibling or as a parent to your kid who's struggling and having trouble making friends and the teacher doesn't think they are succeeding? What do you think would be the appropriate response?
I feel like I would try my very best to put my kid, like, to try and learn the language, and if I didn't know the language, I would try with him, and it'd be like a teamwork thing. Because they work harder if you're working hard to do it too.
The family bonding thing.
Yeah.
Well, there's, like, it's a really crappy situation, and, like, teachers aren't supposed to give up on people.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
kind of, like, point of them. But, I mean, you can't go back. So you just have to, like, stick through it and hope that you can, learn the language.
Yeah.
So just encourage them to be like, you're going to get to the other side of this eventually.
Yeah,
like,
but
hey,
also
it'll
learn
get
it with
better.
them, because, like, if you immigrated as well, like, you're gonna have to get a job,
And practicing at home would be good, even if it's just like a little bit. And like teaching helps people learn. So if like even if you're having your kid like teach things to you and you know like a small amount, then like it would help them as well.
Beneficial across the board.
Yeah.
So how would you teach your child, should they be in this sort of situation, how would you teach them or want to encourage them or your sibling to respond to like other kids that don't understand that you're trying to make friends? So it must be very frustrating because like I know how to make friends at home, I come here, they're kids, they should be my friends, but we're not having. So what sort of mindset would you encourage your younger sibling, family members, whatever, to have towards these people who are really different from them, but they're not sure why? What do you think you would want them to, how would you want them to respond to that kind of thing? How would you encourage them to respond?
Probably putting themselves out there.
Really?
Because I feel like with anyone, if you're trying to make friends, like even if it doesn't go well, like at least you tried. So like don't be like the quiet person. Like try and talk to someone who sits next to you in class, whatever. Even if it's difficult, like you're gonna get better, and maybe that doesn't become your friend, but someone will. And if the more people you talk to, like, maybe someone wants to learn Spanish, they're gonna be like, sick, let's be friends. Teach me some stuff.
I like the baby steps idea. Just be like, you just have to just say hi to the person next to you. I think that's a
That's
really
what I tried
good
in
like
college.
baby steps. So if you immigrated, would you make it a point? Do you think it's important? And these people obviously did, because all these people are, most of them, if not all of them, are second generation. So would you make it a point to continue to teach your culture and your language to your children? Or would you encourage them to incorporate themselves more fully into the language and culture that they had moved to? Which one do you think you would place higher amounts of importance on for your kids?
I feel like a healthy mix.
Mix.
Because I understand the importance of like where you come from and trying to remember that. But also it's not gonna help them integrate.
Right.
If you do that. Like you have to give and take.
I feel like too, like I place an importance on the new culture, but like I feel like you're not gonna lose the old culture, because like that would be my culture, so I'm still gonna like.
Hi, I'm sorry, we have the room at 6:30.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about this in a second.